Behind Hyacinth Bucket's floral teacups, polished manners, and obsession with social climbing lies a world of secrets the BBC never expected to reveal. These are the hidden truths that made Keeping Up Appearances one of Britain's most unpredictable sitcoms. 1. Hyacinth's house was real. When the BBC first considered Keeping Up Appearances, many executives doubted it would succeed. A sitcom built entirely around one woman's exaggerated snobbery seemed far too narrow, and some feared Patricia Routledge's Hyacinth might come across as irritating rather than funny. But audiences felt the opposite. From the very first episode in 1990, Hyacinth's endless insistence on bouquet, not bucket, became a national talking point. What viewers never knew is that behind the scenes, Routledge herself insisted on keeping Hyacinth's world painfully authentic. The now iconic house where Hyacinth tormented her long-suffering neighbors was not a studio set at all. It was filmed on location at 117 Heather Road in Binley Woods, Coventry. To this day, fans from around the world still travel to the quiet suburban street to pose outside Hyacinth's perfectly ordinary house, much to the bemusement of the real-life owners who have lived there for decades. Executives had originally pushed for a studio build to save time and money, but Routledge fought to keep the setting real. She argued that Hyacinth's power came from her attempts to appear extraordinary in an utterly ordinary environment. She won the battle, and the location became one of the most recognizable homes in BBC comedy history. Hyacinth wanted royalty, but she ended up living in Coventry, and it worked like magic. And speaking of Hyacinth's house, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments, and let's see just how far her fame has spread. 2. Onslow's explosive car. Onslow's battered old 1978 Ford Cortina was almost as famous as Hyacinth's teacups. The running gag of the car backfiring loudly whenever it arrived or left became a fan favorite. But those bangs weren't accidents or clever editing tricks. The crew rigged the exhaust pipe with a pinch of gunpowder and a small charge, which technicians manually triggered during filming. Each blast created a plume of smoke, sparks, and the unmistakable bang that became a punchline in its own right. It looked chaotic and spontaneous, but it was actually carefully engineered pyrotechnics. Of course, it wasn't without risk. Crew members inspected the car constantly between takes, and the safety team monitored every scene. Still, the gag was unpredictable, and actors admitted they sometimes jumped even though they knew it was coming. It was low-budget slapstick with real sparks, turning Onslow's clapped-out Cortina into a sitcom star. While Hyacinth dreamed of limousines, her brother-in-law's pride and joy ran on explosions. It was comedy engineering at its most brilliantly absurd. 3. Hyacinth could actually sing. Poor Emmett often clutched his head in despair whenever Hyacinth burst into song. Her warbling was shrill, pompous, and impossible to ignore. On screen, it was played as torture, but in reality, Patricia Routledge had one of the most respected voices in British theatre. Long before she became the BBC's queen of suburban snobbery, Routledge had a celebrated career in musical theatre. She trained as a soprano, performed in operas and musicals, and even won an Olivier Award for Best Actress in a musical in 1988. Her voice was powerful, refined, and admired across Britain's stages. That means every off-key performance wasn't a mistake. It was carefully constructed. Routledge was pretending to sing badly, crafting every cracked note and tortured phrase to sound authentically dreadful. Actors often say it's harder to deliberately perform badly than to perform well, and Routledge mastered that art. So while Emmett winced, the truth is that Hyacinth Bucket had the voice of a star. Every awful song was a deliberate parody, making Hyacinth's vanity even funnier for those who knew the truth. The Lost Special, that aired in America first. Most fans think they've seen every episode of Keeping Up Appearances, but in 1997, a one-hour special slipped under the radar, and it didn't even debut in Britain. It premiered first in the United States. The special, The Memoirs of Hyacinth Bucket, featured Daisy and Onslow stumbling upon Hyacinth's private diary. As they flipped through the pages, the story cleverly wove together classic clips and new material. For longtime fans, it was both nostalgic and revealing, adding an extra layer of comedy to Hyacinth's already obsessive world. But in the UK, the BBC held it back. It only surfaced later on home video releases and occasional reruns. For years, many British fans believed it was just a rumor. Only when the DVDs emerged did audiences realize it was canon all along. A show built on appearances managed to keep one last secret hidden, and even Hyacinth couldn't control where it would be revealed. 5. The BBC's most exported sitcom. When people think of the BBC's biggest international exports, they usually imagine Doctor Who, Top Gear, or Downton Abbey. Few would ever guess that Hyacinth Bucket, fussing over Royal Doulton and candlelight suppers, outperformed them all. Yet by 2016, Keeping Up Appearances had been sold nearly 1,000 times to broadcasters worldwide, making it the most exported BBC program in history. It was an astonishing achievement for a sitcom so unapologetically British. After all, Hyacinth's battles with social class, her tortured neighbors, and her obsession with keeping up appearances were rooted in very specific English humor. But audiences everywhere understood her. Americans embraced her through PBS, Scandinavia adored her, and even countries with no tea-time culture or suburban snobbery laughed at her vanity. Hyacinth's need to rise above her station was universal. The BBC had feared the humor would be too local to travel. Instead, it became global. Hyacinth may have wanted status, but she became something greater, Britain's most exported star. 6. Hyacinth did her own stunts. Hyacinth Bucket may have been a suburban snob, but behind the scenes, Patricia Routledge was tougher than she looked. Throughout the series, Routledge performed nearly all of Hyacinth's physical comedy stunts herself, everything from pratfalls and scrambles to her chaotic tumbles in and out of cars. In a 2023 retrospective documentary, Routledge admitted she only refused 2 stunts during the entire run of the series. Every other moment of Hyacinth's physical humiliation, the near collisions, the frantic escapes, the awkward spills, was done by the actress herself. Colleagues remembered her as completely fearless, throwing herself into the chaos without hesitation. It was a striking contrast. On screen, Hyacinth desperately tried to project elegance and dignity. Off-screen, her actress was falling over hedges, tripping on pavements, and crashing through doors for the sake of comedy. For all her pretensions, Hyacinth's funniest moments weren't just scripted. They were powered by Patricia Routledge's own determination to make her character unforgettable, even if it meant taking a few bruises along the way. 7. Sheridan was never seen or heard. Hyacinth's beloved son Sheridan was her constant pride. She bragged endlessly about his studies, his refinement, and his artistic flair. But the truth is, Sheridan was never seen on screen. In fact, he wasn't even heard. Every phone call came from Patricia Routledge's side of the conversation. Sheridan existed only through Hyacinth's bragging and the family's wry comments. This running gag was a stroke of genius. Viewers built their own mental picture of Sheridan. Some imagined him flamboyant, others lazy, others pretentious. By never showing him, the writers let the audience's imagination do the work. It made Sheridan both omnipresent and invisible, the perfect symbol of Hyacinth's delusions. In a show about appearances, the most important family member never appeared at all. 8. The stage play without Richard. Most sitcoms end with reruns, but Keeping Up Appearances took to the stage. In the late 1990s, creator Roy Clark adapted the series into a full-length play. It toured village halls and even reached New York in 2015. But there was one twist. Richard didn't appear at all. On stage, Hyacinth hijacked Emmett's attempts to direct a local production, leaving her husband entirely off stage. Richard was only mentioned, never seen. Clark did it deliberately, emphasizing just how overwhelming Hyacinth could be when left unchecked. The play proved Hyacinth didn't need Richard to dominate the story. She was chaos enough on her own, and decades later, audiences still lined up to see her in a new medium. 9. The prequel, Nobody Expected. In 2016, the BBC looked back on its most beloved comedies with a special season of revivals. For Keeping Up Appearances, that meant one thing: revealing Hyacinth's beginnings. Young Hyacinth starred Carrie Howard as a 20-something version of the infamous social climber, already desperate to escape her family's working-class roots, already dreaming of refinement. Young Hyacinth was every bit the snob in training. The one-off special drew over 4 million viewers. Critics were divided. Some praised Howard's performance, others argued Hyacinth could never be recast. But it became official canon, written by Roy Clark himself. Even in her youth, Hyacinth was already keeping up appearances, and the prequel showed that her pretensions weren't learned later. They were there all along. 10th, her Royal Doulton. Wasn't Royal Doulton. Hyacinth's proudest possession was her Royal Doulton with the hand-painted periwinkles. She paraded it endlessly as the symbol of her refinement. But here's the truth. It wasn't Royal Doulton at all. The china was actually the Braganza pattern by the Coalcloth China Company, later absorbed into Royal Doulton. By the early 1990s, the Braganza line was discontinued. Hyacinth's prized teacups were outdated, misnamed, and not what she thought they were. The irony couldn't be better. A woman obsessed with appearances built her identity on crockery that was itself a pretension. She believed her cups made her royal. In truth, they revealed the very thing she spent her life hiding. It was the perfect metaphor. Appearances are fragile, and Hyacinth's cracked more easily than porcelain. Keeping Up Appearances wasn't just a sitcom. It was a mirror held up to Britain's obsession with class, status, and appearances. Behind the laughter were lost specials, dangerous stunts, and ironies even Hyacinth could never control. She wanted to rise above her neighbors, impress her friends, and leave her family behind. Instead, she became something greater, a legend, the BBC's most exported star, celebrated, studied, and endlessly rewatched. Hyacinth may have spent her life keeping up appearances, but the truth behind the show is stranger, funnier, and more revealing than any Royal Doulton teacup.